Okay, tonight we're returning to Genesis, um, the spirit of the women in the Bible, and we're going to look at Sarah and Hagar, two famous women from the Bible, the ancient times. And before we go to the scriptures and read the scriptures, um, just a couple of things here to keep in mind as you listen to the scriptures. Okay, now this is a very ancient times. This is in Genesis, remember? Okay, so at that point in time, there were no laws like the Mosaic law that we study and whatnot, because this is long before Moses. And remember, Moses is the guy who had to make all the laws while they were in the desert. All right. Now, there was, as I understand it, what they call the Code of Hammurabi that addressed certain things. But essentially, don't think of it like the the laws when you're studying the rest of the Old Testament, and even in Jesus' time, the Mosaic laws were not there. Okay, and there was no formal religion at that time. There wasn't any Judaism, there wasn't Christianity, and there wasn't Islam. All right, so these people were operating, so to speak, with their natural selves. And when Abraham, now remember, Abraham, again, this is Abraham's period of time. There was no religion, okay, there was no laws, but we see Abraham communicating with God. Okay, and we're going to see more of that once we get into the scriptures today. So just keep that in mind. And remember, the world and the cultures around them, it was pagan worship of gods and goddesses, lots of gods and goddesses. And so, but no formalized religion as we know it. All right. So since we're looking at women and studying women, we need to remember, and especially since we're looking at the spiritual side of things, that the hearts and souls of women are the same, no matter when or what culture. So this was like what, 5,000 years ago or something, and we have Sarah and Hagar, and their hearts and their souls, their feelings, their inner inner strength, courage, but their internal fortitude and whatever is no different than ours. And the only difference is that their culture didn't impose upon them a whole lot of the stuff that we have to deal with today. But their hearts, their souls, their feelings, their emotions, no different than ours today, than women today. And so what you'll see, and what you want to just kind of think about as you go through this, you'll see the inner strength of some of these women. We'll see their courage, and we'll see family disputes, not unlike what we have today. And families have had for generations. Okay. But most of all, you will see and recognize um, God's active presence in all of this. And once again, God's active presence is with us, has been with those in the ancient times, and has never changed. God has always been an active presence. However, we I say we, but even over many thousands of years, many people are not aware of God's presence. And when Jesus came proclaiming God's active presence, God's counsel, his presence here on earth now, not just in heaven. Okay. So keep that in mind as we read these scriptures.
Now Sarah, Abram's wife, bore him no children, and she had an Egyptian handmaid whose name was Hagar. And Sarah said to Abram, Behold now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Therefore go in unto my maid. It may be that I may be consoled by her. And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarah. And Sarah, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her Egyptian maid, and gave her to her husband, Abram, to be his wife. This happened after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. And he went unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes.
Okay, a couple of things here. When you see um, go in unto my maid, okay, and he went in unto Hagar. Okay, I don't think I have to explain what that means, but you need to know that when you're reading, especially these Old Testament scriptures, um, because once a man went in unto a woman, then that was his wife. There were no ceremonies and whatnot. That was his wife, and he was responsible for her. Okay, and so then we see Hagar got pregnant. All right, and this word here, despised, may not be exactly correct, but it has to do with barrenness. Okay, so now, first of all, polygamy. Semitic people have always practiced polygamy, even some sects today over in the Near East. Well, probably in Turkey particularly, and the Arabs still have many wives, concubines, and because Abraham was very wealthy, he was an emir, which is kind of like a glorified prince, so to speak. He had many wives, concubines, and for the most purposes, a wife and a concubine were kind of were the same thing, but they always had a favored wife. And for Abraham, that favored wife was Sarah. Okay, and remember, Hagar was a slave. They called it a bondwoman. All right. And she was purchased by Abraham from an Egyptian pharaoh to give to Sarah as a servant. Okay. So, but let's go back to barrenness. Childlessness is considered a mark of disfavor. Barren women often experienced deep shame with their infertility, attributed to a hidden sin, flaw, or wrong. So, and even to this day, barren women are in divine disfavor and in society's disfavor. Okay. And I don't know if today they still say that a barren woman is barren because of some hidden sin or flaw or wrong. I'm not sure that lasts today, but it's still a bad thing. So, but if a wife was barren and had been married many years, as was Sarah to Abraham, then they could authorize their spouses to, I say impregnate here, but essentially it's impregnate and to be a wife or a concubine. And they could authorize someone, in this case, Sarah, to have the child. And when that child was born, it would become the son of the barren wife. Okay. And then that would relieve the disfavor, they believed, of barrenness from the wife, Sarah. So that was the plan. All right. But we saw that once Hagar became pregnant, she may have lorded that over Sarah, just because of the difference in the status. Because Hagar's status changed as soon as she became a wife to Abraham. Okay, she was and conceived, then her status changed. All right, she was no more barren. That's one thing. And she was Abraham's wife. So Abraham did not have the right, since this was his wife now, to send Hagar away or to expel her. He did not have that. However, she remained a bond servant to Sarah, and Sarah had that. She didn't exactly have that power, but Sarah Sarah was upset because Hagar, well, you know how it is. She she was no longer barren in that, and she sort of flaunted that over Sarah. So what does Sarah do? And Sarah said to Abram, "My wrong be upon you. I gave my maid into your bosom. And when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. May the Lord judge between me and you." Now that's pretty strong between Abram and Sarah. And so Abraham could not do anything. Abraham could not send her away because that was his wife. But so what does Abraham do? Abraham says to Sarah, his wife, behold, your maid is still at your disposal. Do to her as it pleases you. And when Sarah dealt harshly with her, Hagar fled from her on her own. Now, these stories don't go into a whole lot of detail. And so we don't know how Sarah dealt harshly, but with Hagar. But remember, she was a slave. And so anything goes, so to speak. Okay. So her mistress Sarah was despised by Hagar. All right. Hagar gained status upon becoming Abraham's wife, and she could no longer be sold or expelled. Even though she was Abraham's, she was still a bondservant. Okay, and Sarah treats Hagar badly, and Hagar leaves on her own. Okay.
And the angel of the Lord found by her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain on the road to Gadar. And he said to her, Hagar, maid of Sarah, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I flee from the presence of my mistress Sarah. And the angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hands. And again the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants, that they cannot be numbered because of their multitude.
Okay, now we have something that we call it mysticism or visions and dreams. And this comes into play here. Okay, because Hagar had left. Hagar had no idea what she would do or what not, but she had to get out of the sight of Sarah. So when you see in scripture, and the angel of the Lord, you know that this is going to be a vision, what we commonly refer to as mysticism. And so this is God communicating with Hagar. And you have to think vision, dream, think spiritually here. Hagar Hagar just naturally heard God. And when I say naturally, it's what it is that's something that we have. If you want to call it uh, your gut feeling or whatever, but we all have these. We all just sometimes have these thoughts. We don't know where they come from, but and Hagar listened. All right, and so that's really important because she didn't resist. She didn't have any religious training, so to speak. But she heard it and she accepted it. Okay. And with the word of God that said, well, I'll greatly multiply your descendants. Okay. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are with a child and shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard of your afflictions, which means the Lord has paid heed to your suffering. And he will be, this is the son now, Ishmael, and he will be like a wild ass among men, with his hand against every man, and every man's hand against him. and he shall dwell on the borders of all his brethren. And she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her and said, Thou art God whom I saw. Okay, remember this is a vision. For she said, Behold, I have also seen a vision after he had seen me. Therefore, she called the well Bir Dikaya Kazan, which means the well of the living one who saw me. Behold, it is between Rakin and Gedar. And Hagar bore Abraham a son, and Abraham called his son's name, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to him. Now let's look at these things from these last scriptures. All right, it said to her, "You shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Israel." Does that ring a bell? If you have ever read the Matthew, the narrative about Mary, and it's the exact same format. You shall bear a son, you shall call his name Jesus, or Emmanuel, whatever. And so I just wanted to point out that, that was not unique to Jesus. It happened a lot, and maybe even now, because the ancient people believed that it took three to make a child: a man, a woman, and God. So just a little note on that to look at that. And then, okay, and Ishmael, just a little information here. Ishmael became a prophet. He and leader in the Arab world, because Ishmael is the father of Islam, and Muhammad is a descendant of Ishmael. All right. So, and the other thing to keep in mind as this drama goes on is that Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn son. And that is highly significant because he was raised as Abraham's firstborn son. And the firstborn son was the favorite son, was the son that would take over after Abraham's demise. And remember, Abraham was wealthy. He was an emir. He was rich. And so his firstborn son was raised in luxury and spoiled. Okay.
And the Lord remembered Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born to him, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him.
Okay. And now remember, this is about 13 or 14 years later after Ishmael was born. So Ishmael is about 13 or 14, and now Isaac is born, comes into the picture. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham. The word here in our translation is mocking. Some of the Hebrew uses the word playing. Okay. And again, you have to remember that Ishmael was the firstborn son, but here comes another son. The firstborn son was born to, even though she had married Abraham, was born to a bondswoman, a bond servant. Therefore, Sarah said to Abraham, expel this maidservant and her son. For the son of this maidservant shall not be heir with my son Isaac. Okay? And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son, actually, because of his two sons. And God said to Abraham, let it not be grievous in your sight because of the boy and because of your maidservant. Whatever Sarah tells you, hearken to her voice, for your descendants shall come through Isaac. And also of the son of the maidservant will I make a great nation, because he is your offspring. So what we have here, once again, Abraham could not expel Hagar and Israel normally, okay? Traditionally, whatnot, he could not do it, nor did he want to. Remember, he had loved this firstborn son for 13 or 14 years, okay? And not that he didn't love the second one, but Abraham would rather not have had Ishmael sent away. But so what happened, and why did he do it? Because God entered in and said, well, that will be okay, because my plan is for your descendants, according to the covenant that I have with you, that they will come through Isaac. So Abraham, Abraham's love, his human love, is this in this world, human love, okay, was superseded by God's will. So think about that. Okay. So Abram had raised and loved his firstborn son for 14 years. And the tradition in society would say both Ishmael and Isaac would have inherited, but Ishmael would have been the ruler, the controlling head of the family. Okay, had he stayed. So, and again, once again, Abraham gives in to Sarah's wishes, but this time it was God's wishes too.
And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a skin containing water and gave them to Hagar, putting him on her shoulder and the boy, and sent her away. And she departed and lost her way in the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water in the skin was spent, and she was cast, the boy, under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat down opposite him, about the distance of a bow shot. For she said, let me not see the death of the boy. And she sat down opposite him and lifted up her voice and wept.
Okay, now, if you noticed a little contradiction there, what we might think was a contradiction was that Ishmael at 14, 13 or 14, whatever, was carried on Hagar's back. Now, most of the time when you read this, people think, well, it's an infant and that's on her back. But when you look at the math and the birth dates, that's different. So, in the Near East, it is not unusual to see a woman carrying a heavy burden with a child on top of it. Near Eastern women during migrations often carry burdens and place one of their children on them. Many mothers would hate to see their only child walking while they were carrying only a light load. Hagar's burden consisted of ample provisions for the journey, probably a goat skin filled with water, and her son Ishmael. The latter is still referred to as a child, although he was about 13 years old when Abraham circumcised him. Since Hagar was a slave woman, Abraham wanted her to carry Ishmael, spoiled Ishmael, okay, who was awakened early in the morning. Ishmael was Abraham's son and was therefore spoiled. The sons of emirs and rulers seldom walked. They were carried by servants or rode on horses or donkeys. And the Lord heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Arise, take up the boy, and hold him fast in your arms, for I will make him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes and saw a well of water. And she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. Just as a note right here, the name Ishmael means God has heard me. So basically, we know that Hagar talked to God, but when it says, "And the Lord heard the voice of the boy," essentially it means the Lord knew, the Lord recognized that the boy was thirsty, was dehydrated, and was on his way to death. So, and once again, God intervenes in a vision or a dream. Okay. So when Hagar arrived at that point, tired, just couldn't go on, and she put Ishmael down. She basically, there was a well right there, okay, but she couldn't see it because she was so angry, confused, and embittered toward her mistress Sarah. But when Hagar forgot her troubles and bitterness over Abraham's wife, she turned to God and prayed for help. And after calling upon God, she experienced healing. Her mind was cleared and her eyes were opened. And she looked around and the well was right there. These kind of experiences, they really do happen to us all the time. except if you are turned off and you are in a state of perhaps confusion like she was, or anger or resentment, then you won't hear this dreams and visions, this communication with God or his counsel. You won't hear it. But it does happen all the time. And so, when our spiritual vision becomes blurred, our eyes become blind and cannot see the answers to the dilemma. But when we turn to God for spiritual guidance, our eyes lose their blindness and see the right way. And the sources of help are made known. Okay. I thought that was a pretty good way to end this. And now we'll just go back to the starting slide. And I think that we could identify with the hearts and souls of perhaps both women, but for me more so for Hagar. But Hagar, they both had inner strength, courage, but remember, Hagar being a slave, being of a lower class and whatnot, and having experienced bad things, however you want to put it, she was more susceptible to hear God and to God's active presence. Sarah, well, look, it's like it was in Jesus' time, pretty much like it is today. If you are happy, you are wealthy, you are just, the world, you're sitting on top of the world, all right, you're not going to be so much aware of God's presence and counsel. I mean, because seemingly you don't need it because you're happy and whatnot. But Hagar had many problems, some of them caused by Sarah. And it's those people, if you remember from the Gospels, Jesus came to those people like Hagar, and they were much more ready to accept his message of this presence of God and this counsel of God, which was Jesus' message, the kingdom, the counsel, the presence of God here and now, and always has been. Okay, so just a few lessons we can learn, and when you talk about family disputes, you can pick this up and put it down in today. We have these kind of family disputes. It's the same the world over. So that's the beauty of studying the Bible from what we call the spirit of the word, because we look at the hearts and souls of people. Yes, we look at the culture and the history, and that's really interesting. But it's the inner meaning of these things in the Bible is what we go for. So, and we say thank you for your contributions. It really helps us. And just as a last This is just discussion point, and this is where we end our official lecture. So, but I couldn't resist putting this here. So who wore the pants in Abraham's family? And of course, can we relate to these two women? Okay, so that ends tonight. Thank you for being here.